Welcome to a video on how Virtual DOM works in React. After watching this video, you will be able to define Document Object Model, DOM, and its components, describe the working of a Virtual DOM in React, list the advantages of Virtual DOM in React, compare normal and virtual DOMs. The Document Object Model, DOM, is an interface for web pages and documents used to represent an HTML structure as a tree-like structure. Each node represents a part of the document, such as elements, attributes, and text. The DOM allows programs to access and manipulate web documents' content, structure, and style dynamically. The components of a DOM are nodes, elements, attributes, and events. The DOM represents the document as a tree structure composed of nodes. There are different types of nodes, such as element, text, attribute, and so on. Elements are the building blocks of HTML documents. They represent the content of the document. Attributes provide additional information about elements. They can specify properties, styles, or behavior. DOM events allow JavaScript code to respond to user interactions or other actions in the document. The virtual DOM is a concept used in frameworks like React to optimize the performance of web applications. It is an abstraction of the actual DOM implemented in memory and is kept in sync with the real DOM by React's reconciliation process. Let's discuss how the virtual DOM works. Upon the first rendering of a React component, a virtual model of the DOM is created. When changes are made to the state or props of a component, React creates a new virtual DOM representation. React uses a diffing algorithm to compare the new virtual DOM with the previous one and identify the smallest changes required to update the real DOM. React uses batching to optimize changes by grouping and applying them to the real DOM efficiently as a patch, which helps minimize wasteful re-renders and DOM operations. Virtual DOM is important in React. It offers speed enhancement, simple development, cross-platform compatibility, state management, and debugging and testing. The virtual DOM boosts web application speed by reducing the frequency of DOM changes. Developers can concentrate on developing declarative code without being concerned about the intricacies of DOM manipulation. Due to its cross-platform compatibility, React's virtual DOM abstraction enables efficient component rendering on various platforms, such as web browsers and mobile devices. React's state management, in conjunction with the virtual DOM, facilitates effective updates and re-renders in response to alterations in the application state. Virtual DOM simplifies debugging and testing React apps by allowing developers to examine the virtual version of the DOM while developing. The advantages of virtual DOM in React are efficient updates, component reusability, easy updating to declarative syntax, and improved server-side rendering. React's virtual DOM ensures that only the necessary changes are made to the actual DOM, leading to better performance and faster rendering. Virtual DOM allows developers to create reusable components that can be composed and updated efficiently. React's declarative syntax allows developers to describe the intended UI state, and React updates the virtual DOM and renders the components accordingly. Virtual DOM enables server-side rendering in React, improving the initial page load performance and web application search engine optimization, SEO. The normal and virtual DOM differ in their loading process. In the normal DOM, when a web page loads in a browser, the browser analyzes the HTML content and creates the DOM tree from the HTML code. The process includes analyzing the HTML markup, generating the DOM nodes, and displaying the content on the screen. Rendering complex web pages with huge DOM trees can be expensive. In contrast to the regular DOM, the virtual DOM is an abstraction that resides in memory and is not connected to the browser's rendering engine, which means it will not update the changes directly in the real DOM. Upon loading an application, React creates a virtual DOM tree representation in memory called the virtual DOM. This virtual DOM is constructed based on the React component's initial state and properties. When updates are made to the DOM, such as changing the content of an element or modifying its attributes, the browser directly manipulates the corresponding DOM nodes. In contrast, in the virtual DOM, React compares the current virtual DOM with a new form that shows the updated state when changes are made to a React app. Then, React figures out the smallest changes that need to be made to the DOM to represent the new state. These changes are made all at once and then applied to the real DOM, so there are as few transitions and updates as possible. The reconciliation process in React makes sure that only the necessary changes are made to the DOM. This makes it faster and more efficient. Each update triggers a reflow and repaint of the affected parts of the document, which can impact performance, especially in large applications. Let's create a simple React example with two components, a parent component, app.jsx, a first child component, and a second child component. The first child component renders a list of items, and the parent component updates only one item without re-rendering the entire list. But it will also make sure that the second child component will not re-render again. In this example, the app component maintains the state of a list of items. The first child component has a list of array items with one button to update the first element of that item. The second child component only shows information related to that component. The output of the above code is as shown. If you inspect the console logs, you'll notice the following behavior. For the first time loading, all the components will render. When you select to update the item, only the first child component will be re-rendered. Neither the app component nor the second child component will change. React's virtual DOM compares the updated app with the previous virtual DOM and determines that only the state of the first child component has changed. Therefore, it only updates the relevant part of the DOM, the child component, without re-rendering the entire list. This example demonstrates how React's virtual DOM updates only the necessary parts of the DOM, improving the application's performance, especially in scenarios where only specific components or elements need to be updated. In this video, you learn that the DOM allows programs to access and manipulate web documents' content, structure, and style dynamically. Virtual DOM is an abstraction of the actual DOM implemented in memory and kept in sync with the real DOM by React's reconciliation process. React's virtual DOM updates only the necessary parts of the DOM, improving the performance of the application, especially in scenarios where only specific components or elements need to be updated.